Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever felt, the pressure of a history that maybe wasn't entirely yours to begin with, or wrestled with a language that felt like both a gift and, well, kind of cage, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Mhm.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in what I think is one of the most potent corners of global literature, the post-colonial poetic landscape. We've got a stack of source material here, articles, historical context, the poet's own critical thoughts.
Yeah, their essays are key.
Absolutely. And we're applying it all to four incredibly powerful poems from the new literatures in English tradition.
We're looking at four really foundational voices:
Mm.
Derek Walcott, Aga Shahid Ali, Kishwar Nahid, and Edwin Thumbu. And these aren't just, abstract figures for study. They were actively building cultural identity.
Right. They were challenging those rigid historical narratives, grappling fundamentally with how language even works after empire.
hmm
Our sources give us a bit of a shortcut here, a way to really understand the sheer artistic and frankly historical stakes of their work. They didn't just write poetry about conflict.
No, they made the conflict the very engine of their art. That's the crucial distinction.
So that's our mission today, right?
That's it. We want to explore how these writers take these intense historical personal conflicts. I mean, everything from civil war and inherited trauma to patriarchal oppression, even nation building, and transform them.
Transform them into compelling artistic content.
Exactly. Content which demands real rigor in form and craft,
Mm.
not just, subject matter that might rely on shock value or its political weight alone. We're zeroing in on the core conflicts and the often surprising details they use to bring them alive.
And the thing that really seems to unify them, despite being from the Caribbean, South Asia, all over, it's this single, almost unbearable challenge.
Mhm.
How do you articulate a new self, a new culture, when the tools you have, your language, your history, even parts of your identity, are inherited from those who oppressed you? It's a profound crisis of ownership, isn't it?
It truly is. It's at the heart of so much of this work.
Okay, let's dive straight in then. Let's start with a poem that confronts that violent internal conflict head on. Derek Walcott's A Far Cry from Africa.
Right, Walcott. A Far Cry from Africa. The poem is rooted, as our sources detail, in the Mau Mau uprising in 1950s Kenya.
Which was, just an incredibly traumatic and complex moment in history.
Absolutely. The brutal guerrilla war. It was fought primarily between African groups, specifically the Kikuyu and the British colonizers. But it wasn't simple. It was incredibly vicious, marked by massacres, reprisals, violence on all sides.
And the title itself, A Far Cry from Africa, the sources really emphasize this. Walcott's West Indian, right? He's not Kenyan. He's geographically distant. How does that distance factor in?
Well, that far cry is precisely the point. It gives him a kind of critical objectivity. It positions him, as one source puts it, as a third-party observer.
Okay.
He's outside the immediate conflict zone, geographically, but crucially, he's tied biologically, linguistically, culturally to both the colonizer and the colonized.
Ah, so he has skin in both games, so to speak, even from afar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that allows him to analyze this cycle of violence without falling into easy moral camps. He can see the whole horrifying spectacle critically, maybe seeing it as this shared tragic failure.
And he certainly doesn't waste any time setting that brutally objective tone. The opening lines, they're just devastatingly anti-romantic, aren't they? A wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa.
That image, tawny pelt, like the dried orangish-brown skin of a dead animal, it's immediate, it's shocking.
Yeah.
It suggests the land itself is skinned, dead, infertile even, stripped bare by conflict. Any sort of romantic European projection onto Africa, gone, instantly replaced by this visceral image of death.
Then he zooms in on the specifics, the perpetrators, the
Yeah.
victims. But again, no easy heroes. He goes straight for this really jarring imagery.
Kikuyu, quick as flies, batten upon the bloodstreams of the veldt.
Fattened upon, it means to feed gluttonously, to grow fat.
Right, it's parasitic.
Precisely. So by comparing the Kikuyu fighters, who are fighting for freedom, remember, to flies gorging on a carcass, Walcott instantly strips away any simple heroic gloss. He's showing the raw, animalistic horror of it all, where blood has literally replaced water in the bloodstreams.
And then that immediate, devastating juxtaposition. Corpses are scattered through a paradise.
Chilling. That word paradise just hangs there. The implication of Eden, this pre-fall perfection, now utterly corrupted by human violence. This is where he really dismantles that binary of victim versus villain, isn't it?
Absolutely. He refuses to let the political context, however justified it might seem on paper, excuse the atrocity. He points out, scholars and statistics might justify the Kikuyu cause.
But that justification means nothing to the white child hacked in bed.
Exactly. And this leads him to perhaps the most ethically charged comparison in the poem, where he connects the Kikuyu's treatment to historical persecution. Expendable as Jews.
That line always stops me. It's incredibly provocative. Is he striving for pure objectivity there, or is he highlighting the ultimate futility, the moral equivalence maybe of violence from both sides, regardless of the initial cause? It feels like such a painful tightrope walk.
It is. Because what he seems to be suggesting is that the very methods of dehumanization used against the colonized are now being mirrored by the colonized in their struggle. The horror is reciprocal.
So the core conflict isn't really political in the end.
Not primarily for Walcott here. It seems more existential, which he frames brilliantly in that dichotomy he sets up between natural law and, well, human behavior.
Ah, yes, that part really sticks with you. The violence of beast on beast is read as natural law, but upright man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain.
It suggests that when animals kill, okay, it's for survival. It's natural law. But humans, we seem to have perfected killing. We use the infliction of pain strategically for control, for asserting superiority.
Seeking divinity.
Exactly. Essentially playing a god. It echoes that colonial mindset, doesn't it? The white man's burden. Violence becomes not about necessity, but about asserting a kind of perverse divinity.
And he connects this to other historical conflicts too, right? The line, again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause again. Our sources link this to the Spanish Civil War.
Yes. It emphasizes this isn't unique to Africa or colonialism. It's a recurring human tragedy. Both sides in these conflicts commit atrocities, justifying them with some dirty cause. Necessity becomes the excuse.
This relentless critique, this refusal to take sides, it all builds towards the poem's core metaphor, which just brilliantly captures the clash of these two opposing yet maybe equally damaging ideas of selfhood. The gorilla wrestles with the Superman.
The contrast is so sharp, isn't it? Gorilla, that's the dehumanized, savage, instinctual image the West often projected onto the African subject.
Right, primitivism.
And Superman, that's the Western ideal, maybe the Nietzschean Übermensch, the one beyond conventional morality, or even just the pop culture icon of invincibility.
So the clash isn't just physical, it's ideological, an exploitation logic.
Precisely. The highly evolved, technologically superior aggressor clashing with the figure he himself has defined as primitive.
And all of this brutal external analysis, it just sets the stage perfectly for Walcott turning the lens inward, for that personal, wrenching climax.
Yes. After observing all this horror, the conflict becomes internal. He voices the ultimate identity crisis of the post-colonial intellectual, especially one of mixed heritage.
He has to choose where his loyalty lies, but choice feels impossible. Those final lines just deliver the emotional gut punch. I, who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn, divided to the vein?
Divided right down to the vein. It's biological. It's inescapable.
And then the killer question. How choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love?
There it is. The poison, the trauma. It comes from both sides of his ancestry, the English and the African. But the very tool he needs to articulate this trauma, the language of his art, his craft.
It's the English tongue, the oppressor's language, which he loves.
It's a classic paralyzing paradox. Betray the oppressor by speaking out against the violence, or betray the self, the African heritage, by loving the very tool of that oppression.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
It feels impossible, which our sources suggest is exactly why his critical essay, The Muse of History, is so important for understanding his solution.
Yes. In that essay, Walcott argues that to escape this very trap, the New World poet needs to adopt what he calls a tougher aesthetic.
A tougher aesthetic. What does that mean in practice? Is it just about being less sentimental about the past, less nostalgic?
It's much more radical than that, I think.
Yeah.
He's rejecting what he dismisses as victim literature.
Victim literature.
Yeah, the kind of writing that constantly looks back, maybe sadly, maybe angrily, condemning the colonizers, but ultimately keeping the poet chained to that role of the victim, always defined by the past injury.
Okay.
Instead, Walcott demands the creation of new myths. Timeless, elemental visions of humanity rooted in the New World experience, not just reacting to the Old World's history.
That sounds almost like advocating for forgetting history, which seems really controversial for a poet whose work is so clearly steeped in historical events like the Mau Mau uprising.
That's the core tension, isn't it? He suggests that history itself isn't some fixed objective truth. It's more like a mutable fiction, shaped entirely by perspective. Who gets to be the hero, who's cast as the victim.
Ah, okay. So if you accept history's chronology as the absolute truth.
Then you accept the trauma that comes embedded within it. You're
Mhm.
stuck in that narrative. Therefore, for Walcott, true liberation, true creative freedom, comes from refusing to be defined solely by history's absurdity, by its cycle of violence and retribution.
Which leads to that incredibly provocative statement he made, amnesia is survival.
Amnesia is survival. It's powerful. And probably widely misunderstood. It's likely not literal forgetting he means.
More like a conscious choice.
I think so. A deliberate refusal to let historical guilt or inherited trauma dictate your present identity or your future creations. The poet must be, in his words, unencumbered, free to create a new beginning.
Even if, as he also says, the memory is still there, salted with the bitter memory of migration, you don't erase it, but you don't let it paralyze you.
Exactly. Shed the burden of the past so you can look forward. Invent yourself. Invent your world anew. That's the challenge he sets.
And his own epic work, like Omeros, seems to do exactly that, right? Taking Caribbean fishermen and giving them Homeric, timeless, mythic status.
Precisely. Treating the ordinary lives of the New World with the same epic dignity once reserved for Achilles or Ulysses. It's the ultimate act of creative assertion, taking control of the narrative, making myth out of present reality, rather than just lamenting past history. It's a powerful strategy.
Okay, so if Walcott's path involves this tougher aesthetic, this looking forward by sort of actively refusing the paralysis of history, Agha Shahid Ali's approach feels quite different in his poem Snowmen. It seems much more about grappling directly with inherited memory.
Yes, Ali shifts the focus dramatically. We move from that broad geopolitical canvas of Walcott's poem to this intensely personal, almost quiet archive of inherited trauma.
It's quieter, but no less intense.
Not at all. Snowman is a deep dive into how memory gets passed down, how the past becomes physically present in the descendant. He introduces us right away to his ancestor.
The man of Himalayan snow who came to Kashmir.
Right. And the imagery is just so striking, almost surreal, as you said earlier. This ancestor carries a bag of whale bones.
Whale bones from sea funerals. It sounds almost fantastical. And his skeleton is carved from glaciers. What's going on with that imagery?
It's fascinating, isn't it? The physical past is presented as utterly fantastic, otherworldly almost, yet at the same time completely tangible. The whale bones, heirlooms from the sea, they suggest this deep, perhaps oceanic primordial memory connected to migration, death, vast distances.
Okay.
And the skeleton carved from glaciers, well, glaciers represent immense, slow-moving, frozen time, don't they? They hold history locked within them.
So the past isn't long gone at all.
No, it's
Yeah.
right here. It's solid, it's physical, and it's cold. It's frozen.
Which connects so directly to that contemporary idea, that the body keeps the score of trauma. Ali writes it explicitly. This heirloom, his skeleton under my skin, passed from son to grandson, generations of snowmen on my back.
That line says it all. The sheer weight of heritage. He's not just carrying a story or a historical shame. He's carrying the literal physical structure, the skeleton of his ancestors under his skin. Wow. He is the latest iteration in this line of snowmen figures built from cold, perhaps beautiful, but ultimately transient, destined to melt. It implies a kind of fragility, a predetermined fate almost.
And the ancestors themselves, they're not resting peacefully, are they? They're presented as ghostly, unfulfilled.
Very much so. They're trapped in this perpetual winter state. They tap every year on my window, their voices hushed to ice. They haunt him.
Like they need something from him.
It feels that way.
Yeah.
Like unresolved ghosts seeking completion or maybe just continuity. Through him, they're descendant. And they're trying to keep him trapped there with them in that stasis, that frozen past.
But the poem's ending, that's where the shift happens. Where the poet seems to find his own resolve, signaling a move towards freedom. It reads like this intense internal dialogue. He answers a question we don't hear.
Right. A silent question. With that firm refusal. No, they won't let me out of winter. It acknowledges their grip.
But then he makes this radical promise to himself, maybe to them too, that I'll ride into spring on their melting shoulders.
That's the pivotal turn. The only way to escape the frozen grip of the past, the poem suggests, is to embrace change, to move towards spring, towards warmth, towards life.
But that change requires destruction.
Exactly. Rebirth necessitates the melting, the dissolution of that ancestral burden, the snowman. He doesn't just discard them or forget them, like Walcott might advocate. Instead, he uses their melting, their dissolution, as the very vehicle for his own forward movement into spring.
So the price of spring, of moving forward, is the loss of that old structure, A transformation that involves letting go.
A price must be paid. It's a powerful, complex image of breaking free while still acknowledging the source.
This intense focus on transformation, and particularly on the artistic management of this incredibly high-stakes subject matter, ties directly into Ollie's critical thinking, doesn't it? Our sources point strongly to his lecture, A Darkly Defense of Dead White Males.
Yes, that lecture is crucial for understanding his stance, especially within post-colonial literature debates. He made a vital distinction there between subject matter and content.
Right. He was really insisting on literary standards, wasn't he? Above everything else.
Absolutely. He argued that the subject matter, whether it's the tragic beauty of Kashmir, which was his great subject, or the horror of the Holocaust, or any other deeply significant topic, is only, and this is his phrase, artistically interesting when through form it has become content.
So just having a powerful or tragic subject isn't enough.
Not for Ollie. If a poet simply relies on the inherent weight, the tragedy, the political significance of their subject, they risk creating what he rather dismissively called a gloss on the poet's feelings, which he felt was insufficient for art.
He called it the fallacy of judgment, right? Judging the poem based on the moral weight of the topic rather than how well it's actually crafted.
Exactly that. Art, for Ali, demanded rigorous craft. He famously said, "Art is indeed art. What it demands of us is a dog's life."
Yeah.
A life of dedication to the form.
A dog's life. Intense.
Yes, it is. He argued you have to test that intense emotion, that heavy subject matter, with intense artifice, with form, structure, meter, sound, all the tools of poetry to transform that raw subject into something universal, something lasting. Otherwise, he implies you're not really writing poetry, you're just writing a report or maybe an editorial.
You can see how this would be a really important, maybe even controversial stance for post-colonial writers, many of whom feel pressure to be representative voices,
Definitely. And Ollie specifically warned against what he called behalfism.
Behalfism. What did he mean by that?
He meant literature that essentially replaces literary values with purely political or ideological ones, writing on behalf of a cause or a nation or an identity group where the message overrides the art. Ali argued that when ideology dictates the art, the work risks becoming trivial, propagandistic even. It loses its genuine literary quality. He wasn't saying politics has no place in poetry, far from it.
But the politics must serve the poetry.
Precisely. Not the other way around. He often pointed out, that he could personally despise a writer's politics. He used T.S. Eliot as an example, but still recognize and respect their undeniable artistic achievement, their mastery of form.
And this demanding insistence on high standards on craft, it's coming from someone with a complex identity himself, a Kashmiri Muslim, writing primarily in English, often identifying as an exile.
Yes, but he also claimed, quite boldly, what he saw as a highly privileged position. He noted, as our sources mention, that he felt he owned three major world cultures, Hindu, Muslim, and Western, almost effortlessly, just by birth and upbringing.
Wow, owned them. That's quite a statement.
It is. But for him, that blended heritage wasn't a constraint or a site of confusion like it was for Walcott, maybe. It was an opportunity, the engine for his whole project.
An opportunity to do what?
To recreate the English language itself, to infuse it with his traditions, his forms, like the ghazal, which he mastered in English, his history, his sensibility. Salman Rushdie famously called this kind of process chutnifying English.
Right, mixing it up until it has a completely new flavor.
Exactly. So for Ollie, this rigorous, highly crafted, culturally hybrid approach demanding the highest standards of artifice, refusing to let the subject matter float free without the anchor of form that was the only way to lay the groundwork for a truly major new literature. It's how you transform inherited trauma, personal or collective, into enduring artistic content.
Okay, so we've seen Walcott's forward-looking, tougher aesthetic and Ollie's deep engagement with inherited trauma through rigorous form. Now we move to a voice that feels utterly different again. Kishwar Nahid's We Sinful Women. This poem just hits you with its directness, its bluntness. It's a fierce collective feminist protest coming out of Pakistan.
It really is. The poem's power comes immediately from that structure, that hypnotic refrain. It is we sinful women.
Yeah, that repetition is key.
It is. By claiming that label, sinful, which was undoubtedly hurled at women challenging the status quo, they completely flip the script. They wear it as a badge of honor. And it's explicitly a collective voice, we. This isn't just one woman's complaint. It's a declaration of independence, a statement of stubborn self-confidence from many.
And understanding the context here is absolutely crucial, isn't it? Our sources stress this heavily. The poem was written during, or reflects, one of the most intensely repressive political periods in Pakistan's history.
Definitely. We need to understand the condition of women in Pakistan, particularly after 1977, under General Zia-ul-Haq's martial law.
What was happening then?
Well, that era saw a very deliberate, state-sponsored effort to Islamize society, to essentially fuse culture and religion in a very conservative mold. And this had devastating consequences for women's rights, imposing highly restrictive rules through laws like the Hudud Ordinances.
Right, controlling women's movement, dress, testimony in court.
Exactly. And the justification for all this, as the sources detail, was rooted in this idea of Pakistan itself, the name literally meaning land of the pure.
So Pakistan as the land of pure ideals.
Precisely. And within this deeply conservative theological framework, women became the symbolic bearers of that purity.
Ah, so any deviation by women.
Any assertion of independence, any perceived westernization or modernization, even just basic self-determination, was framed as corruption. It wasn't just seen as individual behavior, it was seen as defiling the pure culture of the entire nation.
Which effectively reduces women primarily to their reproductive role or their perceived sexual purity.
And enforces control through shame. Shame becomes the ultimate weapon. Being labeled impure or sinful was a way to silence and control.
So Nahid takes that very label, sinful, and turns it right back on the accusers. She details exactly why they're considered sinful.
And the reasons are all acts of defiance against submission. Look at the list she provides. They are sinful because they are not awed by the grandeur of those who wear gowns, a direct challenge to political and religious authority figures.
Right. No deference there.
They are sinful because they don't sell our lives, refusing to be commodities. They are sinful because they don't bow our heads and who don't fold our hands together. It's a complete rejection of the expected physical posture of female submission.
And the central irony she exposes is just staggering. It forms the core of her critique of that patriarchal system.
Absolutely. The women who defy the system, who seek truth, autonomy, basic dignity, they are the ones branded sinful. Meanwhile, the actual exploiters, those she describes as who sell the harvests of our bodies, they are the ones who become exalted, become distinguished, become the just princes of the material world.
It exposes the complete moral bankruptcy of a system that cloaks oppression in the language of piety and purity.
Precisely. The system is designed to reward the exploiters and silence anyone, especially women, who dares to speak the truth.
And these women, the poem makes clear, they know the price of their defiance. It's not easy. They come out raising the banner of truth up against barricades of lies on the highways.
It's a conscious act of public resistance.
But they immediately find evidence of prior repression, the costs paid by others before them, stories of persecution piled on each threshold.
The history of silencing is right there, on every doorstep.
And the chilling line, tongues which could speak have been severed.
It's horrifying. This isn't just metaphorical silencing through shame or law. It could be literal, brutal violence used to stop dissent. The poem moves from that quiet, internal refusal of submission in the early stanzas to this image of radical, collective public action and the dangers involved.
Yeah, it documents the struggle, the fight against those barricades of lies.
And it culminates in this incredibly powerful, unstoppable image of hope and sheer defiance. The poet declares that the wall of oppression, the old ways of confinement, has been razed, torn down.
And she insists it must not be rebuilt. There's a warning there, too.
Yes. And the final image is a direct challenge to the darkness, the repression, perhaps specifically the night of martial law. Now, even if the night gives chase, these eyes shall not be put out.
Wow, that's fierce.
It is. It's this resolute insistence on stubborn self-confidence, on vision, on voice. It declares the impossibility of extinguishing the light, the awareness of these women who have dared to look up, to speak out. It's a profound refusal of victimhood, even when facing seemingly absolute power.
All right, our final poem takes us now to Southeast Asia, to Singapore, and into a very different kind of post-colonial project, the conscious, intentional work of nation-building. We're looking at Edwin Thumbu's Ulysses by the Merlion. This feels like a really complex, layered, intertextual piece.
It absolutely is, and the complexity starts right with the title and the central figure Thumbu chooses. He deliberately uses the Latin or European name Ulysses.
Not Odysseus, the Greek original.
Exactly. Ulysses is the figure more associated with Tennyson, with James Joyce, the wanderer, the explorer, perhaps the modern existential figure searching for meaning. Odysseus is often more tied to the Trojan War, to strategy, to homecoming, perhaps.
So choosing Ulysses immediately does something. It connects Singapore
To the established Western literary canon. Right off the bat, Thumbu is positioning his work, and by extension Singaporean literature, not necessarily as a rejection of that Western foundation, but as an engagement with it, perhaps an extension or revision of it.
And he makes that connection explicit, doesn't he? Our sources point out specific echoes of Tennyson's famous poem, Ulysses.
Yes, very clearly. Thumbu's Ulysses says, "I kept faith with Ithaca, traveled, suffering much, enjoying a little," which directly parallels Tennyson's Ulysses, saying he has enjoyed greatly, suffered greatly.
So Thumbu is deliberately stepping into that lineage.
It seems so. He's saying our experience, our journey here in Singapore, it belongs in that same epic tradition. He's revising the great Western narrative, giving it a distinctively Southeast Asian flavor and context.
But the figure Ulysses encounters in Singapore is utterly modern and uniquely, almost artificially local. The Merlion?
Ah, the Merlion.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a fascinating symbol, precisely because it's not ancient myth. As our sources detail, it was created, essentially invented, in the 1960s by the Singapore Tourism Board.
Right, a marketing creation almost.
Initially, perhaps, but it was created out of a real need. It blends the city's supposed origins as a fishing village, Mer, for sea, with its legendary name, Singapura, meaning Lion City.
So half fish, half lion.
Exactly. And the key thing is it's a manufactured myth for what was, in many ways, a manufactured nation.
Singapore being multiracial, multicultural, it needed a unifying symbol that wasn't tied exclusively to Malay, Chinese, Indian, or Eurasian history.
Precisely. It couldn't draw on one group's ancient myths without excluding others. So a new symbol had to be created, as one source puts it, almost out of scratch.
And this is where that clash of canons happens in the poem. Ulysses, the great Western traveler who's seen cyclops, sirens, battled gods, he arrives in modern Singapore and is stopped in his tracks.
Stopped cold and puzzled by this brand new symbol. He says, nothing in my days foreshadowed this half beast, half fish, this powerful creature of land and sea."
That moment feels really significant. The seasoned Western explorer, the man who represents the pinnacle of ancient European experience and knowledge, is speechless. He has no category for this.
It's a fantastic reversal of the usual dynamic, isn't it? Usually it's the West observing and categorizing the exotic East. Here, the Western mythic figure is confronted by something utterly new, something potent from the East that he can't classify. The Oriental gaze is flipped.
The West is suddenly the one left wondering.
Exactly. And after introducing this encounter with the symbol, Thumbu turns his Ulysses' gaze towards the people who built this modern city. He would say, people settled here, brought to this island.
And importantly, they built towers topless as Iliums.
Yes. That's a direct reference to Marlowe's description of Helen of Troy launching the ships that burnt the topless towers of Ilium. Thumbu is deliberately inserting Singapore's modern commercial success, its skyscrapers, into the stream of epic world historical achievement. He's saying our ambition, our building, is on that scale.
He also describes the Singaporean people very pragmatically, doesn't he? As intensely practical people.
Very much so. They make, they serve, they buy, they sell. There's a clear acknowledgement of the economic engine driving the island nation. Commerce is central.
But it's not just commerce. He says, despite their diverse origins, their unequal ways, they still strive.
They mutate, they explore the edges of harmony, search for a center. That's the ongoing, challenging project of nation building laid bare.
Trying to create a cohesive identity out of all that diversity.
Exactly. They hold on to memories of their specific race or origin through prayers, customs, dress, foods, but they must embrace new visions, new ways of living together, daily. That search for a cultural synthesis, for harmony, isn't just poetic. It's essential for the nation's survival.
And the Merlion then comes back into play as addressing a need beyond the practical, beyond the economic.
Yes. Ulysses observes that having dealt so much in things and material wealth, having perhaps surfeited on them, become full, maybe even sick of them.
Their spirits yearn again for images.
They need something more than just economic success. They need symbols, myths, sense of collective soul, perhaps. So they create the Merlion and consciously add it to their existing pantheon of ancestral figures. The dragon, the phoenix, the Garuda, representing the different cultural strands.
So the Merlion transcends being just a tourist logo.
In Thumbu's vision, yes, it becomes, as the poem concludes, this image of themselves, a symbol reflecting a pragmatic, modern, resolutely multiracial society that is actively, consciously forging its own unique identity out of sheer necessity and political will. It's myth-making in action for survival and for the future. Hashtag ad outro.
Wow. What an incredible journey through just 4 poets, but covering so much ground, so much intensity. We've really seen them grapple with the overwhelming weight of the past, haven't we?
Absolutely. From Derek Walcott's violent internal choice between two defining cultures and his radical call for that tougher aesthetic to break free.
Right, to Aga Shahid Ali's deep dive into escaping that heavy, frozen memory of his ancestors, insisting on the rigor of art to transform it.
hmm And then Kishwar Nahid's fierce collective feminist rejection of imposed purity, that powerful insistence on raising the banner of truth against state repression.
Yeah, that was powerful. And finally, Edwin Thumboo's intricate fusion of the Western explorer encountering the new, deliberately constructed myth Singapore, embodying that nation-building project.
Four very different contexts, four very different approaches.
But what really connects all these voices, listening back now, seems to be this profound insistence on creative action over just passively inheriting or lamenting the past. It's a rejection of victimhood.
I think that's exactly right. The New World, in their various visions, isn't defined solely by historical chronology or by suffering. It's defined by the poet's refusal to be silent, by their need to transform trauma, conflict, complexity into enduring art, into content.
And their commitment to forging new myths, new narratives that can somehow encompass multiple, often fiercely conflicting inheritances.
They all demonstrate in their unique ways how to take the master's tools, whether that's the English language or established poetic forms, and make them serve their own radically new purposes. They insist on the agency to name their world, to mythologize their experience, and to essentially re-begin on their own terms.
Which leaves us, and leaves you, our listener, with a final, maybe provocative thought to mull over. If history is, as Walcott suggests, perhaps a mutable fiction shaped by perspective, what inherited heirloom in your own life, maybe it's a language you love, maybe a fixed identity you carry, maybe a trauma you feel, the weight of what heirloom must you choose to either, like Ollie's snowman, let melt away or actively transform in order to write your own true beginning?